Ohio State beats up on Rutgers 49-10, one of the long-standing traditions in the Big Ten. The Buckeyes are 5-0, going to Michigan State next week before a bye. So we're coming up on the halfway point of the season. And C.J. Stroud's had a pretty good first half of the season so far, but here's what he did tonight. 13 of 22, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, one of his least impressive performances of the season so far, at least statistically. Steven, I think you wrote after the game, this is like sort of the first chink in the armor as far as the Heisman campaign. What grade would you give C.J. Stroud for this performance?
Giving him a C-. I made this reference. It reminded me a lot of Justin Fields against Indiana in 2020. Not nearly as many interceptions. He only had 1, but it was off. It was weird. It was janky. He had a couple of throws that were like, but the lead up to it was like Justin Fields was on fire that year. And it pretty much put himself, if not at the top, near the top of the Heisman race, even if they got that season started. C.J. Stroud's the leader in the Heisman race right now in 2022, and then he put up a stinker. So it's like the only difference is Justin's was so late in the season, it was such a condensed year that he could never really make up for it. While CJ, he's got a whole back half of a season with some better opponents to make up for it. But as far as today, this is probably the worst game he's played since coming back from the shoulder problem. It's the first time since the Minnesota game he's been under 60% completion percentage, and the first time since the Tulsa game he's had less than 200 passing yards. So C- from me.
I guess if you're going to have a stinker, do it in Week 5 when you win 49-10 anyway. But, Doug, would you call this a stinker? And what grade would you give C.J. Stroud?
I'll give him a C+. I went to the Rutgers post game, and Greg Schiano was talking about how they decided they wanted to take away the pass, and they were willing to give up the run. And why wouldn't you do that at this point, right? He said, hey, the quarterback's a Heisman Trophy candidate. You got to try something. So we did that, and then Mayan Williams has a huge game. It's interesting because, of course, why wouldn't everybody do that, right? Now, it didn't really work. I mean, Rutgers wasn't close to winning. But are we getting close to the point of C.J. Stroud really missing Jackson Smith and Jigba? Because that, to me, that's the guy when a defense says, we're going to take this away. I feel like C.J. and Jackson, as you've said, Stephen, many times, they have a connection. They know each other so well. Jackson has a knack for getting open versus zone and man. He knows when to settle in. And that's the guy I think that C.J. would go to at the times where it's like, well, they're trying to take it away, and we're not going to let them. And it's not that Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. and the other guys aren't good, but they don't have the same experience with CJ. So, it's not like an alert or anything, but I think CJ needs his guy back, right? And he's been really good. But I thought today it felt like he missed him because Rutgers made a choice, and the result was a mediocre game for CJ Stroud.
Jackson Smith-Njigba unavailable for the second straight game with the hamstring injury that's been lingering, but was out here doing sort of a individual workout on his own. Looked like he was moving around pretty well, so we'll see what that leads to. I'm still skeptical he plays against Michigan State, that they might hold him out through that off week and give him more time to recuperate for the second half of the season. I'm going to just call this a flat C. This wasn't a game where they needed C.J. Stroud to throw the ball at his best to win, because they knew early on that they could turn this over to Mayan Williams in the offensive line in the run game, and C.J. Stroud was willing to do that. But when he did have to pass, when he did throw, it certainly was not his sharpest performance. I asked him about the interception coming out of the second half, and it wasn't that coming into the second half, coming out of halftime, and he said it wasn't that he didn't see the coverage. It was just that he thought he could fit a ball in over that coverage, which is an interesting development for him. But also he comes out of it saying, I still think I can make that throw. I've just got to go back and figure out what I did wrong to make that throw next time. So part of the trial and error, it's him pushing his limits a little bit and figuring things out on the fly. And you get to do that when, I guess, you win 49-10. In another game, it might cost Ohio State. But today it just goes down as sort of a clunky 49-10 blowout. More about that on Buckeye Talk. And get the text, 614-350-3315. That's how you would have heard today about Trevion Henderson being out right before the game, about the other injury developments. They were coming straight to your phone right before the game from Buckeye Talk.